Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. The backdrop is different today because I'm sitting outside the Titans practice facility, and Greg will be here next week. We've got training camp, bud. Welcome back to football.
It's that time of year. I know it's crazy. Now it's training camps and everybody's breaking down every single play. That's I guess it's that time of year.
Well, so that's why we're here, or that's why you're here, rather, to have
Yeah.
more nuanced and reasonable conversations, of course. So I guess from your standpoint, Greg, you've talked to so many coaches across your career, regardless of position.
Yeah.
Not to age you, but decades and decades of football
I
experience at this point.
got a couple of years. Been a
Yeah,
couple of years.
been around a little while at this point. So I guess, with the hyper focus here, Tennessee Titans, number one overall pick, Cam Ward, first training camp practice yesterday. And you'll be here next week for yourself to see what he looks like, and
Sure.
you've already gotten an up close and personal look at him, of course. But for you, when you talk to coaches about what they're trying to accomplish at this time of year, specific to the quarterback position, how would you kind of define that for the audience so they have better context?
Yeah. Well, the thing the audience doesn't know, and I certainly don't know either, you'd have to be, in all their meetings and understand is each day they want to get something specific accomplished. They're not just going out and calling random things and say, oh, let's see how he does today. Each day there's something specific they want to get accomplished and they want to work on. And you have to understand what that is because otherwise what happens is you can watch a quarterback in particular, and that's going to be the focus clearly with the Titans, as we know. Um, as you start looking at every play and deciding, oh, he threw a bad ball, that means he's not doing very well, that's not the way to evaluate it. The problem for fans and even for media to a large extent is you don't know exactly what they're asking each day. I always think back to a story, and I'm sure I've told you this, but I think it's important to reiterate when Ron Jaworski, he was a seventh year player. It was 1980. He ended up being the NL MVP, the NFL MVP that year. But Dick Vermeil was the head coach. And he brought in Sid Gilman. That's a name from the past. Maybe a lot of people listening don't know who Sid Gilman was, but he was considered the father of the modern day passing game. And Dick Vermeil brought him in to coach Ron Jaworski. And Jaws had been in the league 7 years. And one of Sid Gilman's main principles in training camp was we want to push things to the limit as much as we can. We do not care if you make mistakes. In fact, we want you to make mistakes because what's important to find out in training camp is what you personally can and can't do, what we as a team can and can't do, because the worst thing is not to find those things out, Buck, and then it's week 3 and you're uncertain as to should we call this play in this situation? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that not whether Cam can handle it or whether the offense is going to be able to run it so you want to push things to the limit. And the mere fact that Cam Ward, he might have a day where he throws 5 picks in training camp. And you know how that goes. You're there. All that's going to be talked about is, oh my God, Cam Ward, he's just, I don't know why they drafted this guy. But those things are part of the process. And in many ways, they're positives because then everybody learns. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the quarterback to figure out and feel confident in what he can do and what he can't do. And the other thing that plays into this is then you go to Cam, and when they're game planning, they because coaches do this, they ask the quarterback, hey, on third down, what do you feel comfortable with? If it's 3rd and 7, what do you feel comfortable with? Because the last thing you want to do as a coach is call plays that the quarterback's not comfortable with, because that's a problem right from the start.
Yeah, and just to kind of give some additional context based off yesterday's practice, first day of training camp out here at essentially
Right.
St. Thomas Sports Park. I don't track completions or incompletions at practice, Greg, but Jimmy Wyatt, our mutual friend, does. Jimmy had him at
Yeah.
12 of 17 in practice yesterday, and Cam gets up there and was not, I wouldn't say disappointed with the performance, but left some throws on the field, knew he left some
Sure.
stuff on the field, and came away saying, it's day one. We were fine. I didn't throw a pick or anything like that, in not so many words, but he is almost looking to make more mistakes so that
Sure.
they can put these things on tape as you're describing, go back and watch the practice film and discern that comfort level as they work through this in different situational settings that they'll set up. They're running about 80 plays a day at practice to try and get as close to game and conditioning stuff as they can possibly get while being out here on the practice field,
And
not full contact.
And here's what you don't know as well, and a lot of teams handle this differently, so you just don't know, is whether with Denard Wilson's defense, does the offense know what he's going to call? Are they coordinating that? Or is the offense saying, hey, we want to work on this today, and they don't know exactly what Denard Wilson wants to work on, and therefore, hey, they may get a blitz that they weren't prepared for, and the offense looks bad on that given play. So we don't know if there's coordination between the two or how much coordination. There's different levels of coordination. Um, and also, what you don't know is how they're teaching Cam Ward with specific route concepts versus specific coverages. Where do they want him to throw the ball if he gets this coverage? Where do they want him to throw the ball in the specific route combination if he gets another coverage? There's all kinds of factors that go into this. It's so detailed that it's hard to just sit. Sometimes I tell people, for years, obviously, I've gone to the Eagles training camp because that's in my backyard. And as soon as I come back, let's say at NFL Films, the next day people say, "So what'd you see? What'd you see?" And I always tell people, it's so hard to know exactly what you see because you don't know exactly what they're asking guys to do on that given day.
Yeah, and to your point, obviously the defense is trying to make those improvements as well, trying to
Of
continue to
course.
stack days and determine because it's a young roster here specifically. We're talking specifically about the Titans,
Right.
but they're trying to work towards a specific goal on defense as well. And in the same way that they're approaching that with the offense, the defense, as you've said, is going to have different situations that they want to put themselves in and the offense in to try and see what everybody's comfortable running, especially right now, Greg, while they're missing some pieces and parts. L'Jarius Sneed is obviously the biggest talking point here as he comes back from a knee scope, and that would impact, of course, how things are going to run, much less the fact that Sneed doesn't really practice like that, and how all those things would have to come together.
Yeah, and then there's also you have to think about individuals. Some guys, let's say it's an offensive lineman, a young player. Maybe J.C. Latham says, "Hey, today this is what I really want to focus on to get better at." And he talks with Coach Callahan about it, and they say, "Okay, yeah, you're going to work on that specific thing today." All this is to get both individuals better, get units better, and then by obviously the time you get to week one, and still early in the season, things still have to work out because nothing is exactly the way it is until you start playing real games. So there's just so many variables, Buck. It's hard to make definitive determinations as to exactly how a player is doing. And obviously, we know the focus will be on Cam Ward. So everybody's going to look at him. Like you said, I think I did see that stat because I do take a peek at the Titan stuff. I don't devour it in detail because I'm watching tape now and I'm back watching NFL tape. In fact, I've been grinding through the Broncos and Rams defenses because those are the first two opponents. So I've just wanted to get a really good feel for them, especially since I'm going to be down there next week. But you just don't know. And it struck me watching the Broncos defense, and we'll talk about this way more, obviously. But Barton was on the Broncos last year, and I'm watching the Broncos defense, and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to be able to give them a lot of info on Vance Joseph's concepts. But then the other factor is, and like I said, we're not going to have a lengthy conversation about this now, but Vance Joseph knows that too. So he might adjust his tendencies a little bit because he knows that Barton can give the offensive coaches a lot of information.
God knows the Titans are going to need everything that Cody Barton can give them beyond the homework that they're going to have to do themselves.
Yeah.
Because as we've talked about and will preview closer to the season, obviously, Vance Joseph knows exactly what he's doing and he's got the horsepower to get it done up front. I mean that first four games, Greg. I know we don't have to get into schedule talk right now because I want to ask you what if you're coming in next week specifically with
Right.
questions that you want to learn about and because
Yeah.
obviously we'll react to that next week when we get together. But that first four games of away Broncos, home Rams, home Colts, away Texans, Cam Ward
Yeah.
and that offensive line, man, they're going to be up against it
And I'm going
week
to watch
after
the
week
tech.
after week.
Yeah, I'm going to watch the Texans defense. If I don't get to it this week, I'm going to get to it when I come back from Nashville because I'd be watching them anyway because they're a really good defense and they've got a lot of good players. But I also want to see schematically what they do. Like I said, we won't get into specifics, but watching the Broncos defense was really fascinating. And there'll be a lot for us to talk about as we preview that week one matchup because that defense is really schematically interesting. But and the Rams, and they're totally different. See, that's the thing. Each week in the NFL is a whole different deal as far as the schematics you face. So that's why training camp is a hard deal to really make definitive statements. And you know, like Cam said, he was 12 for 17, but I'm sure in his mind he probably said, oh, well, and he doesn't have to tell the media everything. Obviously, no coach or player does, but in his mind he may be thinking, oh, there were 5 reads. I didn't just get it exactly the way I need to get it. But you don't know that, and we none of us know that.
Yeah, we've got a Gen Z quarterback here in Nashville now, and so he described all of that. He summed it all up by saying it was mid yesterday, Greg. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
about as much detail as he should or will give us at this point in time, and whatever we're able to learn from the coaches positionally, whether it's Brian Callahan at the podium, we'll try and take as much away from that as humanly possible.
I did watch Cam's press conference a little bit just because obvious for obvious reasons. Um, he's a very he's an impressive guy as far as just his whole demeanor. And again, I found that out from speaking to people through the draft process just because I loved his tape and I thought he was clearly worthy of being a number one pick. So I tried to find out a little about the person. But and I met him, of course, when I was there for minicamp. But
Mm-hmm.
I think he's an impressive kid. Whether that means he'll be a great player, only time will tell. But I think there's something about him.
The mental makeup is something that they are confident in being a plus for the team,
Right.
for him, and for the rigors of an NFL season. Now, you mentioned that you're going to be coming back next week for training camp. We'll have fully padded practice for the first time while you're here,
Yeah.
which I know we're all looking forward to. So, offensively, defensively, Greg, what are some of the things that you're coming in with an objective to find out beyond what you may learn during your time here?
Yeah, I think once the pads get put on, to me, I think that's where the run game factor becomes important. Obviously, you're not looking to smack people around and try to hurt anybody, but I think that's where you're going to really get a sense of the O line. I think that's something people will focus on. And again, you're not going to have all the answers, but you're going to want to see how the O line starts to work together. A hard thing to see, by the way, and I'm being totally honest because it's just hard because Coach Callahan is a big believer in adjustments based on fronts, based on defensive line movement, second level movement. We're not going to know all those adjustments, but I think the cohesion of the O line because it's new pieces. You've got Latham now on the right side. You've got a new left tackle and more. You've got Cushenberry, who's he's back. But he missed a lot of time last year. You've got a new right guard. Now, it's Kevin Zeitler's seen everything in his career, but still, he hasn't I was fortunate enough to go to the O-line masterminds in Frisco, Texas with Duke Manyweather and Lane Johnson and Jeff Schwartz, and those guys do an unbelievable job. And all you hear about is working together, cohesion of an O-line. It's not just the individual. Obviously, you want individuals to play well, and there are times when it's just one-on-one and, you got to block guys. But I mean, when it comes to the run game, it's so much cohesion. And no matter how long a guy's been in the league, he hasn't played next to J.C. Latham. He hasn't, I'm talking about Kevin Zeitler. He hasn't played next to Cushenberry. All that has to work together. How they work combo blocks, how they respond to a shift in the front before the snap of the ball. All these things you start to get a feel for because you're going to see that in training camp. And see, again, you almost want the mistakes now. You want the mistakes now because you don't want the mistakes when you're playing Zach Allen and Franklin Myers week one. They're really, really good players.
Yeah. And just something to emphasize in particular at this time of year, because Cushenberry has been available to an extent, but
And not even practice.
he is on PUP to start training
Yeah,
camp, physically unable to perform. So
yeah,
right now, Corey Levin is getting the practice reps with Cam Ward, and obviously that will change the dynamic. Lloyd can snap the ball and go through the communication parts of it and be in the
sure.
meeting rooms and things like
But
that.
until you
But the
play,
on-field
it's
reps are critical.
Yeah, and the other thing I love looking at training camp is I love watching the wide receiver and the cornerback drills because that to me, that the NFL very often comes down on the outside to matchups. You can't be a big time wide receiver in this league if you can't win 1-on-1. I mean, it's as simple as that. Sure, you have to develop feel for zones and zone voids and soft spots, and that's critical. And that's why veterans like Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, they can really help Cam Ward in that regard, working against zone, understanding where the soft spots are, working into the soft spots. So Cam is comfortable when he sees it so he can throw with timing and anticipation. But at some point, you got to line up and you got to win 1-on-1. And I find those drills because they're super competitive because that's just 1-on-1. And you know how corners are. I mean, corners, they have swagger, they have attitude, and to me, those drills really are, they're just fun watches at training camp.
Yeah, for example, Jarvis Brownlee and Traylon Burks up against each other yesterday. Cam, and this was team, not one
That's
on
right.
one.
Yeah.
But just a 50-50 ball up in the air for Traylon Burks. Brownlee able to break it up, even though he's clearly at a disadvantage from a size standpoint. But
Yeah.
that competitive nature, that competitive toughness that you're speaking to helps define how much guys are going to be able to be relied upon out here and how much, the wide receiver core continues to be evaluated, given how many, and we've talked about this before, given how many new pieces and parts, young and old, that they've added.
And Brownlee's a great example because he's a swagger guy. I mean, he's a talker. He's super competitive. That's one reason. I mean, I liked him a lot coming out of Louisville. He was a fifth round pick because he's under 6 feet, and people probably see him as a slot corner, not an outside corner in the league. So therefore, he's a fifth round pick. But he's going to play in the league, and he's probably going to play for 10 years. Whether he ends up being the slot corner here in Tennessee, we know that McCreary is, I believe, in his last year of his contract. Is he not?
Correct.
It's, I mean, again, not to look ahead, you don't know anything that's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me if McCreary is they let him walk and Brownlee becomes a slot corner. But you love to see those battles, and coaches love to see the competitive. That's what they want. One thing I've learned, and I've learned this at all positions. It's true of offensive linemen. It's true of corners. You're not always going to look pretty. It's just the nature of the game because it's great athletes against great athletes, and particularly O linemen. They're not always going to look pretty making blocks, but you know what? You got to get guys blocked.
Yeah,
And,
it's
they want to see guys compete and battle and fight because sometimes that's what it takes.
coaches will always tell you, you don't have you obviously have to take your technique to the fullest extent that you
Of
can,
course.
but as long
Right.
as you finish at 100 miles an hour, it doesn't have to look the prettiest as long as you get the job done.
I can tell you right now, there are going to be snaps in the early part of the season against the Zach Allens, the Kobe Turners with the Rams, and the Braden Fists, where they beat you quickly, and then you able to recover. And sometimes recovering just involves being competitive and physical. You're 100% right, and coaches will always coach technique. That's where it all starts. And but sometimes it's a matter of recovering because you're going to get beat. So then and that's why I think when the pads go on, I think coaches look for that a lot, particularly with the O line.
Well, I know you're looking forward to getting back down here, Greg. We're looking forward to having you in person, as is the case. Oh, we've gotten a lot of you here down in
Yeah,
Nashville
yeah.
the last couple of months. We love it as much as we'll take as much Cosell in person
Is
as
it
we
going to be
can
100
get.
degrees next? Going to be 100 degrees next week, Buck?
Brother, 108 real feel yesterday. It's going to be a little cooler today at 104. I don't know
No,
what kind of black magic I can work to get the weather to subside for you for the week, Greg, but we'll do the best that we can, brother.
I know. Hey, it's Nashville in the summertime. It is what it is.
It is
It's
what it
that's the
is.
way it
And
goes. Yeah,
everybody's grinding during training camp. You, me, everybody else out here.
that's
But,
right.
buddy,
That's right.
appreciate you taking some time this morning. I got to scurry to a press conference, but we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, Buck. Thanks so much.